Hey everybody, my name is Lucas. I recently got some new arrows I'm going to build, so I thought I'd make a video and show you the step-by-step process in which I do to ensure I have the most accurate arrow for both 3D and hunting. So stay tuned and I hope you learn something. Hey guys, so this has been my current setup for the last few years. Easton Axis 5mm. Nothing too crazy up front. I got a 25 grain iron will collar, the regular hit insert 16 grains inside there, and 100 grain point. And I've been shooting these AAA Max Stealth vanes. They've been really good for me for both broadhead flight, and I like how quiet they are. The only thing I have not liked about this arrow is how heavy it is. The grains per inch for this 300 spine are 10.7. So with this arrow set up, I am at 505 grains total arrow weight. And I wanted to lighten things up a little bit this year and try something new. And so I've heard great things about these Black Eagle Rampages. And these are also very similar to the Easton Axis 5mm. These are also a carbon shaft, 5mm. However, for a 300 spine, they are only 8.7 grains per inch. So right there with my 28.5 inch arrow, I'm cutting more than 50 grains for total arrow weight, which should give me more speed and tighten up my pin cap a little bit. All right guys, well the first step I do when I take these out of the box is I take all 12 and spin test them. I look at each end of the arrow, and what I do is mark the end which would have more of a wobble to it, and that's the end that I'm going to cut off when I cut this arrow shaft down to the correct length. That way I'm getting the straightest part of the arrow shaft, since I want the straightest arrow I can get for my broadhead flight. These are straightness tolerance of 1/1000, so they should be pretty straight from the factory. But you never know, so it's always good to check. So let's go ahead and check this one. So I can see right now the back is spinning pretty good, and there's just the slightest wobble up front. So what I'm going to do is take a silver Sharpie and mark the front. That way I know on this arrow shaft I should cut down to length on the front only. Take a look at this one. Alright, so this one is the opposite. The front is spinning very well and the back just has the slightest wobble. So I will mark the back on this one. And when I go to cut these, I'll know to take the length I need off from the back. Alright, so this one again is a little wobbly on the front and the back is spinning perfect. So I'll mark the front and I'll cut from that end of the arrow. Again, that is to provide the straightest shaft that I can get to ensure I have the best broadhead tune possible, so that these can hit right with my field points come this fall. Alright guys, I'm going to repeat this step with the rest of these shafts and then go ahead and cut these down to length. Alright everyone, so out of all 12 shafts, only 2 of them need to be cut from the front and the back. The rest just need to be cut from the front, and I'm going to end up cutting these down to 28.25 inches. They come in 32-inch long shafts, so for these first 10, I'm just going to set my arrow saw at 28.25, and then these last 2 I'll show you how I'm going to cut a little off the front and the back. So right now I have my arrow saw set at 28.25, and one thing you want to do when cutting these, you don't want to just set it in here and shove it into the blade. You want to lightly press and rotate the shaft. That way you're getting a straight, even cut all the way around. So here we go. turned out pretty good. Let's do another one for you here. Alright, so now that we have those 10 cut, we have these last two in which I have to cut a little bit off the front and the back. So like I said before, these came in 32-inch shafts, and I want my finished shaft to be 28 1/4. So 32 minus 28 1/4 is 3.75 inches, and that divided by 2 is 1.875. So that's pretty exact. I'm not going to get that close, but what I'm going to do is basically split the difference on my arrow saw to take equal amounts off the front and the back. So that 1.875 plus 28.25 is 30.125, so just over 30. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my arrow saw to 30 inches. If I can get it loose here. So I'm going to adjust this to 30 inches, and that'll take 2 inches, and I'm going to take it off the front. And then the last 1.75 inches I'll take off the back. It's not exact, but it's pretty darn close. So I have my arrow saw set at, let me double check, 30 inches. And I'm going to go ahead and cut the fronts off these two arrows. Alright, so now that that's done, I'm going to adjust my arrow saw back to 28 1/4 inches and take the rest off the back. And I'm just going to double check here with an arrow shaft I've already cut, and that's exactly right. So for these last two, I'm going to put them in, it's going to look backwards, but I'm taking that last 1.75 inches off the back. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so as you guys can see, there's 12 arrow shafts, all the same length, and all at 28 1/4 inches. Now those two that I did cut a little differently, those labels are going to be a little bit farther back than the arrow shaft. Now if you're OCD like me and want everything to look the same, all I'm going to have to do is take a little acetone and I can rub that logo right off, so it'll just be a black arrow shaft, which some people might not like, but I'd rather have that than that logo being in different spots of the shafts. But that's what you got to do if you want to get the straightest arrow shaft you can when cutting them. Now that we've got these all cut to the correct length, the next step that I do is take my silver Sharpie and I'm going to mark on the shoulder this exposed carbon that I just cut. Now I can see that pretty clear, contrasted to the black carbon. And now, once I have that marked up, I'm going to use my G5 arrow squaring device And I'm gonna make sure by putting it up against this 90-degree face with this sandpaper, I'm gonna rotate my arrow, and as it's spinning, it's shaving down the carbon, squaring the face of that cut. Now, if I take a look, I can see that none of that silver Sharpie is left. So that means I've shaved it all down and it's a perfectly square shoulder. Now, if it wasn't, say one end was a little bit lower than the other side, you would see that silver Sharpie, and that would be a clear indicator that your arrow is not square. And if that's the case, depending on how severe, you could either continue shaving it down with the your arrow squaring device, or you might have to go back out and cut a little bit more off. It's up to you. But I'll continue this step with the next 12, and then we'll start inserting inserts. All right, everyone. Now the next step, after we have squared up both ends of the arrow shaft, is to prep them for inserting the insert. So what you need to do, there's a lot of carbon dust in here right now, and we need to clean that out so that the epoxy can get a good bond on the carbon shaft and on the insert. So what I have here is some denatured alcohol. Get some on a Q-tip, and a Q-tip fits pretty darn good in these 204 diameter shafts. So you stick a soaked Q-tip up in there, and you'd be surprised on how much carbon comes out. So what I do is I put that soaked tip in, then I follow it up with a dry one to get most of everything out. And there's still a little bit more up in there, so I'm going to do it one more time. And that one is pretty clean. Go ahead and do a dry one. And that's clean. So I'm going to repeat this step for all 12 arrow shafts. I'm only going to do it on the end that I'm sticking the insert in, because that's where the epoxy is going to be. And I'm also going to take each insert and rub the denatured alcohol on the insert to take off any residue from the manufacturing, and let this dry before I do any epoxying. But I mean, you probably can't see it, but there is some grime and dirt on this thing straight out of the package. So to get the best bond between your arrow and the shaft, follow that step, and that'll help you greatly with keeping your inserts in. All right, everyone, now that we have squared and cleaned the inside of the shafts and the inserts, it's time to install them. These Black Eagle Rampages do come with 50 grain outserts. For this build, I'm going to use the Easton Hit insert. And one thing I like about the Hit insert is that if you do get any damage to the shoulder, you can take it back to the squaring device and square it up to help tune your broadhead. If you have an outsert on, you can't really do that without heating up like a point to loosen the glue inside the shaft and pulling that insert, squaring it, and you're risking damage to the carbon at that point. So that's one of the reasons I like the Hit insert. So I'm going to go with these, and today I'm going to use this glue I got from Bishop Archery. It's the Cold Carbon 72-hour epoxy. So once I put these in, I'm going to have to wait 72 hours, 3 days, before I can do any tuning with my bow through paper. And I've had good luck with this so far. So I'm going to keep using it until I find something better. But right now, this is the best I can find. So it's a two-part epoxy. So what I'm going to do is remove the cap, squeeze out 2 equal parts, and go ahead and mix that together. Now, you saw when it came out, it was a black and a white color. So you're gonna mix it until you get kind of a consistent dark gray all the way around. All right, I think that's good. So I'm going to be using this insert tool from Easton. One thing to note about this, so it's really nice how you put the insert in and you shove this all the way to the shoulder on the shaft, and it sets your depth perfectly for the insert. However, when you do extract the tool, there's a few things you want to do. You don't want to pull it straight out. That'll cause a lot of suction and it'll actually suck the insert back towards the front of the shaft. So what you need to do is twist this tool as you retract it. Now, even twisting the tool and retracting it, I've had some inserts pull forward, and you can see I have my knockout, so it wasn't due to any air pressure from inserting it. It was just the way this has these little rings around it. It's a very tight seal inside the shaft. So one thing I do, which really helps with installing these inserts, I take a knife and on one side I cut these little rings off. And what that does, it allows for air to pass through on the inside of the shaft, and that doesn't create any vacuum when you pull this tool out. But it still provides all the shelf it needs to put that insert inside the shaft and put it in square. So let's go ahead and put one in this first shaft. So this will be the front of the arrow. And these inserts do have the holes in the back to allow air, so even if you had a knock in, it would prevent, or it should prevent, any vacuum, or not a vacuum, but pressurized air inside of the shaft, and that would push your insert back out. But I have, just for making sure nothing bad happens, I got the knocks out anyway. So you go ahead, and you don't need too much. What I do is I just cover all of the areas where the glue fills in towards the back. And I go ahead and I start this insert by hand. And I twist it as I'm pushing it in. And you'll see some excess epoxy start to come out. I wipe that off. You don't want too much getting inside into the threads of the insert. So right now I have the insert in the shaft all the way to the edge of the front shoulder. Now I'll take the side of the tool that I cut that little groove into, and I'll push and twist. And I'm twisting the shaft as I do this. And now I'm seated all the way against this tool. And I'll continue to twist and extract. Now that I've done that, I will wipe any excess epoxy off and lay this down flat. The key is to lay it down flat so that your insert doesn't go forward or backwards if you have it upright. And then these ones, like I said before, since I'm using this cold carbon 72, I'm gonna have to let it sit for 72 hours. So once I complete all of these, the next step would to be put my collars on, and then my point and my knock, and then do some paper tuning. So I'll see you guys in 3 days. Hey everyone, it's now 4 days later. The epoxy on the inserts is now all cured, so I can go ahead and shoot these. I have a 100 grain point, 25 grain iron wheel collar, and also the nocturnal lighted knock. And what I'm going to do now is shoot these through my homemade paper tuning setup here and see how they're shooting out of my bow. This will do two things. One, it's going to show me did I pick the correct spine, which I believe I did. It's a 300 spine, and for me, that's based on the Aerospine charts, what I need. And then also it's going to show me where I need to have my knock orientated in relation to the arrow shaft, and so essentially knock tuning. And what we're going to do is find where we need to have the stiffest part of the spine in order to shoot a bullet hole through paper. And once we do that to all 12 arrows, that's going to give me the most accuracy downrange with broadheads, especially fixed blade broadheads. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and shoot these through my bow and see what kind of results I get. All right, everyone. So I'm going to start with, there's kind of this caution note, this statement regarding safety when shooting these arrows. And that's kind of a good reference point. So I'm going to start with that straight up, just kind of know where I started on all these arrows. And if it ends up being that's where I shoot the bullet hole, that's how I'll leave it. But I'm probably going to have to do some knock tuning to get this to be a perfect bullet hole. But we'll start with this and see how it goes. All right, here's the first shot. All right, well that looks pretty dang good. From here, it is a perfect bullet hole. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but I mean, you can't ask for much better than that. So maybe that caution statement I should run straight up out of this setup. But like I said before, this label gets put on randomly at the factory, so it's probably not going to be the same on every arrow. What I'm going to do now, just to kind of show you guys how to knock tune, or how I would say if I didn't get a perfect bullet hole, I'm going to go ahead and rotate my my knock and shoot it again. I'm going to show you the difference that I'm going to get in this paper. All right, guys, I have now rotated the knock 90 degrees to the left. And I'm going to shoot this again through paper, and we're going to see if this tear changes at all. All right, so as you can see, I did get a tail left tear on that. So that's going to show you, let me back out here real quick. So this shows you right here the importance of knock tuning. Now if I was just to run off the label, like I was talking, I mean, and I started out with this was luck of the draw on the first one, having it to be a perfect bullet hole. But if I would have started with this orientation of my knock, I mean, I would have started with a tail left tear, and I mean, at 40 yards with the fixed blade broadhead, you might be 6 to 10 inches off. So this really shows you the importance of it, and it's a very important step to building the most accurate arrow that you can. All right, everyone, now that I've knock tuned all my arrows, I'm going to go ahead and start the fletching process. The first thing I'll do is put a wrap on it. As you can see right here, with my silver Sharpie, I went ahead and marked where I want the top of the arrow shaft to be when the arrow is in my bow. So all 12 of these I have marked here where they knock tuned to be a perfect bullet hole through paper. This is just a reference point. That way I know how to fletch my arrow so that the cock vein is on the top. So to put these wraps on, what I do is first clean the arrow shaft. You can either wipe it down with denatured alcohol, or what I like to use are these AAE Max Clean arrow wipes. They seem to work pretty good. So what I'm going to do is, on this wrap, I'm going to try to get this Boning logo to sit on the top of my arrow in relation to this line that I've made. So what I'm going to do, there's a few ways you can do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lay my arrow down with the silver Sharpie mark up, I'm going to go ahead and lay the wrap right on top. So that's the logo. Bear with me here. So that the logo is directly in line with that silver Sharpie mark. Go to press down. So as you can see, that logo and that silver Sharpie are right in line. So this way, now that I have my wrap on, this will be my indicator, and I'll put my cock vane right in line with this. So now what I do, I go ahead and roll all the way one way and put pressure down. And then finish the roll out while applying pressure. And there you got it. One wrapped arrow. So I'm going to go ahead and do this to all 12, and then after this step we'll be fletching. Alright, so the next step is to take one of your AAE Max Clean wipes and go ahead and wipe the arrow wrap before you put any fletchings on with glue. So what this is going to do is clean any residue off that arrow wrap or any debris, so that way you can get the best adhesion with your fletching in this wrap as possible. Alright, now that we have the arrow wraps cleaned, the next step is to be gluing on these fletchings. I'm going to be using the AAE Max Stealth vanes. I have good luck with these for both being quiet and for good broadhead stabilization. So I'm using the Last Chance Archery VaneMaster Pro to put these fletchings on. So the first thing you need to do with these is go ahead and use your primer pen and clean off any residue from the factory that's on this fletching, and give that a couple seconds to dry before applying your glue. And also, I have this set up right now like I was talking before. I want my cock vane to be in line with this Boning logo, which is in line with the mark that I have when I was knock tuning. So since this, I'm going to do 3 fletchings at a 3 degree right helical. As you can see, the VaneMaster Pro, you can clip through all locations of your fletchings. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the cock vane. Apply my glue. You don't need a lot, just a nice bead all the way across. And then I line it up with this black index line right here. Make sure I get it perfect. And that sets my distance between the throat of my knock and the back of my fletching to where I like it. Go ahead and put this right on the jig and push it forward and hold. I usually hold for about 10 seconds, just long enough for that glue to set up enough to hold the fletching there as I pull the jig away. Alright, that should be good. Go ahead and pull this off. I take that, one thing that I really like to use to clean this off is that same wipe we're using before, and wipe off any glue off of these rods. They can get built up pretty quick if you don't do this. And then I'll take a napkin and wipe any excess glue that came from the sides or the front or the back. Go ahead and wipe all that off. Alright, so there's my cock vane. I'm doing all 3 white. I know you like to have the cock vane in a different color, but with this Boning logo I can in low light I can differentiate this cock vane compared to the others. So that's what works for me. So I go ahead and rotate this to the next position and repeat those steps that we just did. Use my primer pen to clean the vane. I have forgotten this step before, and I did not get a very good adhesion on that arrow, and I could definitely tell right away when I stuck it on there. So it does help. Put a nice thin bead. Line it up with my mark. Go ahead and push on and hold for about 10 seconds again. All right, pull that off just like before. Take this wipe, clean off any glue off of these rods. Helps keep it clean for future use. Go ahead and take my paper towel. Get any extra glue that may have oozed out. If you're doing it right, you shouldn't have much, but I don't usually do it right. I usually get more than enough. All right, so now this last one. Same thing, primer pen. Go ahead and clean that vane. Let that dry. Go ahead and get my glue. Again, put a nice thin bead. A little goes a long way with this stuff. Line it back up with my reference point. Set it on the jig. And apply pressure. Alright, that should be long enough. Go ahead and remove this. Clean these rods back off. Get the excess glue. That one I used a little much on. Alright, and there you have it. Pretty simple. 3 fletch, 3 degree to the right. Turns out pretty good, and I'm getting good flight out of this setup, so we'll see how it does with these new arrows. Alright everyone, well there you have it. That's my process of how to build the most accurate setup I can when building my arrows. I'm really excited how these ones turned out. They're coming in right at 454 grains, or excuse me, 445 grains, which is about 60 grains lighter than my current setup. So I'm excited to see how these do. Hopefully it tightens my pin gaps up a little bit. And I did do 3 with a right helical at 3 degrees and then 3 with a left helical at 3 degrees. I'm going to do some broadhead testing, and I'll make a video on that later to see what my results are, but I'm really interested because when I clocked these out of my bow and I was paper tuning them, they all clocked to the left naturally. So I'm thinking with that left helical, it'll just stabilize that broadhead even faster right out of my bow. So more to come on that. I'm excited to see those results, but I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something how to make arrows for yourself and make more accurate arrows. And if you have any comments and things I can do differently to help my setup and the process I use, I'm more than open to hearing what those are. I always like learning new tricks and tinkering with my archery setup. So thank you guys for watching, and stay tuned for the next one. Thanks.